Let's get right into it. Number 10. The Ostrich effect. You've just gotten a scary letter from the taxman, or maybe an email from your boss with the subject line urgent, regarding your recent performance. What's your immediate, primal instinct? Is it to rip open that envelope, click on that email, and confront the potentially awful truth head on? Absolutely not. For many of us, the first reaction is to shove it under a pile of junk mail, archive it into the digital abyss, or simply pretend it doesn't exist. Congratulations, you've just engaged in the ostrich effect, a delightful cognitive bias where we avoid negative information, literally burying our heads in the sand like a cartoon bird. Our ancient ancestors, faced with immediate, tangible threats like a saber-toothed tiger, learned that sometimes ignorance was bliss, at least long enough to run in the opposite direction. If you couldn't see it, maybe it couldn't see you. This worked pretty well when the threats were physical and immediate. But in the modern world, those threats are often financial, medical, or relational, and ignoring them doesn't make them go away. In fact, it usually makes them fester and grow into something far worse. That ignored tax bill turns into fines. That unaddressed health symptom turns into a crisis. And that unspoken argument with your partner turns into a silent war. So, while your brain is still trying to protect you from scary information, it's actually setting you up for a much bigger, much more painful confrontation down the line. It's like avoiding a tiny leak in your roof because you don't want to see it, only to come home one day to a full-blown indoor swimming pool. Number 9. The Hyperactive Agency Detection Device. You're alone in your house. It's late, and you hear a creak from downstairs. Is it the old pipes settling? The wind? Or is it a masked intruder slowly ascending the stairs, sharpening a butter knife, and humming your favorite lullaby? If your mind immediately jumps to the latter, congratulations, your hyperactive agency detection device is in overdrive. This is our innate tendency to attribute agency-conscious thought, intention, or action to ambiguous stimuli, especially when there's a perceived threat. Back in the caveman days, this was a lifesaver. Hearing a rustle in the bushes and assuming it was a predator, even if it was just the wind, was a much safer bet than assuming it was just the wind and getting eaten. The cost of a false positive thinking a predator was there when it wasn't was minimal, maybe a few seconds of elevated heart rate. The cost of a false negative thinking it was just the wind when it was actually a predator was, well, becoming dinner. So, our brains evolved to be paranoid, to err on the side of caution. But in today's world, where actual predators are less common than, say, a rogue cat knocking over a lamp, this instinct often leads to chronic anxiety, unfounded suspicions, and a general distrust of everything that goes bump in the night or tweets in the darkness. It's why we see faces in toast, hear voices in white noise, and assume every anonymous comment online is a personal attack. Your brain is still screaming better safe than sorry, while you're just trying to enjoy a quiet evening without convincing yourself your toaster is plotting against you. Number 8. The sweet tooth sabotage. Let's be honest, resisting a sugary treat is like trying to resist the gravitational pull of a black hole. Your brain just craves it. A gooey cookie, a perfectly frosted cupcake, a soda so sweet it makes your teeth hurt. These aren't just indulgences, they're echoes of a primal survival instinct. For our ancient ancestors, calories were king, food was scarce, and anything packed with energy, especially sugar, which signals ripe fruit, honey, or other calorically dense goodies, was a goldmine. Your brain literally rewarded you with a hit of dopamine for finding and consuming these rare, life-sustaining treasures. The more sugar, the better. It was a brilliant system for survival in a world of scarcity. The problem? We now live in a world of abundance, where sugar is not only plentiful, but injected into practically everything. From your morning cereal to your supposedly healthy yogurt. Your brain, however, hasn't received the memo. It's still operating on the sugar equals survival program, constantly pushing you to seek out and consume as much of the sweet stuff as possible. This leads to rampant obesity, type 2 diabetes, and a whole host of other chronic diseases that are literally killing us, slowly. So, while your primitive brain is throwing a party every time you chug a sugary drink, it's actually laying the groundwork for a future full of doctor's appointments and regret. It's like your internal programming is stuck in a famine, even though you live next door to a 247 donut shop. Number 7. The social comparison trap. You're scrolling through social media, seeing highlight reels of everyone else's seemingly perfect lives, exotic vacations, flawless selfies, ridiculously photogenic meals, and career triumphs that make your cubicle feel like a punishment. Your primal brain, however, isn't equipped to process highly curated digital facades. It's still operating on the ancient assumption that what you see is what you get. And what you're seeing is that everyone else in your tribe is doing spectacularly better than you. Back in the ancestral savannah, comparing yourself to others was a vital survival mechanism. It helped you gauge your status, identify potential mates, and understand your place within the group hierarchy. If Og was building a better hut, maybe you should learn from Ogi. If Tag had more berries, maybe you should find out where he was foraging. This social comparison served to motivate and regulate group dynamics. But in the age of Instagram filters and carefully constructed online personas, this instinct has gone horribly, terribly wrong. Instead of healthy motivation, it fuels envy, anxiety, and a crushing sense of inadequacy. Your brain, bombarded with impossible ideals, starts churning out cortisol and telling you you're not smart enough, pretty enough, or successful enough. This constant self-flagellation, born from a once useful social tool, is actively contributing to rising rates of depression and body image issues. It's like your brain is desperately trying to keep up with the Joneses. But the Joneses now live in a perfectly lit, heavily edited digital mansion that doesn't actually exist. Number 6. The fight or flight freeze response. You're walking down a dark alley, bad choice. By the way, and suddenly, you hear footsteps behind you. Your heart pounds, adrenaline surges, and your mind races through a million escape plans. This is your classic fight or flight response. A primal survival mechanism designed to help you either punch a saber-toothed tiger in the face or sprint away from it at Olympic speeds. It's fantastic for immediate, physical threats, but what happens when the tiger is your boss yelling at you, or a public speaking engagement, or a particularly aggressive telemarketer? Sometimes, your ancient brain has a third, less glamorous option: freeze. Instead of fighting or fleeing, you just stop. You go numb, you can't think. You might even dissociate. For a deer caught in headlights, freezing might make a predator lose interest or fail to spot them. For an early human, playing dead might have occasionally worked against a less motivated beast. But in modern high-stakes situations, freezing up can be disastrous. Imagine you're in a car accident and you freeze instead of reacting. Or you're confronted with a problem at work, and your brain just locks up, preventing you from articulating a solution. This evolutionary leftover, designed for very specific predatory encounters, often leaves us paralyzed and helpless in situations where decisive action is actually required. It's like your brain still thinks it's a possum, playing dead to avoid a perceived threat, while you're just sitting there, totally unable to explain why you didn't respond to that urgent email. Number 5. The loss aversion loop. You've got a stock that's plummeting, a relationship that's clearly doomed, or a project that's just never going to work. Rationally, you know the smart move is to cut your losses, sell that stock, end that relationship, or abandon that project. But something deep inside holds you back, making you cling on even as things get worse. That, my friend, is loss aversion, a powerful cognitive bias stemming from an ancient survival instinct. The pain of losing something feels significantly worse than the pleasure of gaining an equivalent amount. For our ancestors, losing resources, food, shelter, a valuable tool could literally mean death. So, evolution wired our brains to protect what we already have with extreme prejudice. A squirrel burying nuts and meticulously remembering their location is a prime example of this in action. The potential loss of those nuts far outweighs the potential gain of finding new ones. In the modern world, this translates into terrible decision-making. You hold on to losing stocks hoping they'll miraculously recover, throwing good money after bad. You stay in toxic relationships because the thought of losing what you have, even if it's miserable, is scarier than the unknown of being alone. You cling to failing projects, pouring endless hours into them, simply because you can't bear to abandon the effort you've already invested. Your brain is trying to save you from perceived loss, but it's actually just trapping you in a cycle of diminishing returns, leading to bigger losses down the line. It's like refusing to throw out a moldy sandwich because you paid for it, even though eating it will clearly make you sick. Number 4, the availability heuristic hype. You're watching the news, and suddenly, every report is about shark attacks, plane crashes, or rare diseases. You immediately start feeling that these terrifying events are everywhere, and that your chances of being eaten by a shark on your next vacation are now practically 50-150. This is the availability heuristic kicking in, a mental shortcut where your brain estimates the probability of an event based on how easily examples come to mind. Back in the day, if your tribe mates kept talking about a specific type of poisonous berry, it was probably a good idea to avoid that berry. Information that was easily recalled or frequently discussed was often indicative of a real, immediate threat. It was a quick, dirty, and usually effective way to assess danger. The problem is, in our modern, media-saturated world, the most available information isn't necessarily the most probable. News outlets, for obvious reasons, prioritize sensational, rare, and dramatic events. So, while you're bombarded with images of plane crashes because they make compelling television, you're far more likely to be injured in a car accident. But those are rarely front-page news. Your brain, still operating on ancient software, equates vividness and frequency of reporting with actual statistical likelihood. This leads to irrational fears, misguided priorities like obsessing over a shark attack when you live 0 miles from the ocean, and sometimes outright panic. It's like your brain is deciding what to worry about based on what's trending on TikTok, completely ignoring the boring, mundane, but far more dangerous realities of daily life. Number 3, the fundamental attribution error in traffic. Someone cuts you off in traffic. What's your first thought? Is it, oh, perhaps they're rushing to the hospital for an emergency? Or maybe they genuinely didn't see me because of that sun glare. Good one. No, your immediate, fiery internal monologue probably goes something like, what an absolute idiot. How dare they? Clearly, they're a self-centered, incompetent menace to society. Congratulations, you've just fallen victim to the fundamental attribution error, a delightful cognitive bias where we attribute other people's negative behaviors to their inherent character flaws, while attributing our own similar behaviors to external circumstances. Our ancient brains needed quick judgments about who was friend or foe. If someone consistently behaved selfishly or aggressively, it was safer to label them as bad and avoid them, rather than wasting precious time pondering their complex situational factors. It simplified the social landscape. The problem is, this instinct, in a world full of complex interactions and legitimate external pressures, turns us into judgment machines. When you cut someone off, it's because you're late, you're stressed, you had a momentary lapse. When they do it, it's because they're fundamentally flawed humans. This bias fuels road rage, exacerbates conflicts, and makes us less empathetic and understanding, ultimately damaging social cohesion. It's like your brain is always looking for a villain in every story, even when the villain is just someone having a really bad Tuesday. Number 2, the status quo bias. Comfortably stuck. You're presented with an opportunity to switch to a better, cheaper, more efficient phone plan, or perhaps change banks, or even try a new route to work that promises to shave off 10 minutes. Logically, it makes sense, but something inside you resists. You stick with the familiar, even if it's clearly inferior. This is the status quo bias. our powerful preference for things to remain the same, even when change would clearly be beneficial. For our ancestors, stability was survival, the known path, the familiar foraging grounds, the established social order. These represented safety and predictability. Experimenting with new, unknown variables carried significant risks, e.g., that new berry might be poisonous, that new path might lead to a predator's den. So, staying with the tried and true, even if it wasn't perfect, was generally the safest bet. Our brains evolved to be profoundly risk-averse when it comes to change. In the modern world, this translates into missed opportunities, technological stagnation, and a general reluctance to embrace innovation. We stick with outdated software, inefficient processes, and even unhappy relationships, simply because the effort and perceived risk of changing feels overwhelming. Your brain, still wired for ancient predictability, sees any deviation from the norm as a potential threat, even if that deviation leads to massive improvements. It's like your brain is a comfortable old couch. It's not great. It might have a suspicious stain, but at least you know exactly where the springs are broken. Number 1. The in-group out-group obsession. You're at a sporting event, fiercely cheering for your team, feeling an intense bond with every stranger wearing the same colors as you. Meanwhile, you might feel a sudden, inexplicable disdain for the fans of the opposing team, even if you know nothing about them. Or perhaps you're in a heated online debate, instantly siding with people who share your opinion and dismissing anyone who disagrees as inherently wrong, misguided, or even evil. This, my friends, is the in-group out-group bias in full. Terrifying swing, our primal, hardwired tendency to favor members of our own group, the in-group, and be suspicious, or even hostile, towards those outside it, the out-group. For our ancient ancestors, this was the bedrock of survival. Your in-group was your tribe, your family, the people who shared resources, defended against common enemies, and ensured your genetic lineage continued. Trusting your in-group and being wary of the out-group who might be competitors for food, territory, or mates was literally the difference between life and death. Your brain quickly learned to categorize and discriminate, often based on superficial cues, because misidentifying a threat could be fatal. The problem, of course, is that in the modern world, our tribes are no longer just small bands of hunter-gatherers. They're political parties, sports teams, online communities, musical genres, even fan bases for different brands of coffee. And this deeply ingrained tribalism, once a survival tool, now fuels everything from petty online squabbles to devastating real-world conflicts. It leads to polarization, prejudice, and a complete inability to empathize or even logically discuss issues with anyone who holds a different opinion. Your brain, still stuck in the savannah, sees nuanced arguments as existential threats to your group's survival, and anyone not with you is automatically against you. It's why rational discourse often devolves into shouting matches, why echo chambers proliferate, and why we'd rather believe outlandish conspiracy theories propagated by our side than accept inconvenient truths from the other side. This ancient instinct, designed to protect your small band of brethren, is now actively tearing apart complex societies, turning diverse groups of people into warring factions over trivial differences. Your brain, in its desperate attempt to keep you safe within your tribe, is ironically making the whole human experience far more dangerous and utterly exhausting. That's all for today. I'll be making similar videos in the future. Subscribe to see them.